Thanks very much, Keith. A big takeaway I gained from your presentation is the importance of compute. And I think that there is one company that is synonymous with providing cloud computing services, and I also think with innovation, because it was a company that used to be synonymous with delivering books. So I'm extremely excited to be able to follow up that presentation by introducing Mike Miller, who is the Director of Product Management at Amazon Web Services. And he's responsible for leading multiple initiatives across AWS, focusing on generative AI. In November of 2023, his team launched Party Rock and Amazon Bedrock Playground, which is a fun, intuitive, and hands-on generative AI app building playground. No coding skills are required. So for those of you who are in fields outside of traditional computer science domains, this is an amazing opportunity for you to gain familiarity with these models. Mike previously led the AWS AI and ML thought leadership team. And as a result of that group's effort, we now have AWS Deep Lens, Deep Racer, Deep Composer, and these are tools that are fueling development worldwide, helping aspiring machine learning developers get hands-on with the latest technologies. This followed on a whole host of AI-related innovations that Mike has led at Amazon, and Mike also has a kind of interesting background in that he's led product as well, developing Fire TV, which I'm sure many of you are enjoying the fruits of his efforts there in your homes at the moment. So Mike has over 30 years of technology experience from startups to large corporations, and has held leadership roles at Google, OnLive, Motive, and Trilogy, working both in the Silicon Valley area and in Austin, Texas. So Mike, if I can invite you up. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David. All right. Thanks, David. Thank you, Alliance, for having me. Very excited to be here. I'm not actually from SoCal. However, I did work on my master's degree from MIT through an internship at the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab at Caltech. So SoCal has a very special place in my heart, and I'm really excited to be back here chatting with you all. And I want to bring a little bit of Amazon's culture of innovation to the table here, and talk a little bit about my innovation journey and sort of some of the things that I've learned through innovating at a big company like AWS and Amazon, and some of the mechanisms and techniques that we use to think about innovation. And hopefully this will be a great learning experience for some of you. Obviously, you're not, many of you are not in a big corporation trying to innovate. You're startups and entrepreneurs and building stuff on your own. But I think a lot of these lessons you can take back with you. And if your startups get funded and you grow them, these things will be great ways for you to kind of move forward as well. All right, pizza. I love pizza. Quick show of hands. How many people do you think 2 pizzas can feed? 2 to 4 people. Raise your hand. Okay. A few. How about 4 to 6 people? Yep, mostly. How about 6 to 8 people? Yeah, if you're pretty hungry, or maybe even more than 8 people, right? And so I bring this up because you may have heard, of course, one of Amazon's tenets in the way we think about organizing our teams for innovation and execution is by this rule that we call the 2 pizza team rule. And so we build teams that are of a size that 2 pizzas can feed. Why do I like this? Because it's flexible. It kind of gives and takes, right? So how big are your pizzas? How hungry are the people who are eating them? All these things can factor into varying the number of people that make up an ideal team for innovation at Amazon. The other thing I like about this rule is that it doesn't talk about the makeup of the team. So for instance, I might need an extra data scientist or 2, or maybe I need an extra hardware program manager, or maybe I need just a lot more software developers. This sort of theme at Amazon, this 2 pizza team guidance, isn't restrictive. It doesn't sort of focus on a particular set of unwavering rules and regulations. So I'll talk a little bit more about the Two Pizza team as I get into my innovation journey. So again, my name is Mike Miller. I'm a product manager or director of product at AWS and Amazon. I've been really fortunate to have an amazing 11.5-year journey with Amazon. I started in 2012 and I joined the team that was conceiving and building the Fire TV device. And this was really exciting because Jeff Bezos was really passionate about this product. So I got to attend a bunch of meetings, write a bunch of docs, and have interactions with Jeff on a pretty regular basis. And so I got a deep dive into Amazon's culture of innovation, our leadership principles, and our customer obsession. So and so that was Fire TV. After Fire TV, I moved over to the AWS organization, where I was the general manager of this thought leadership team that David introduced earlier. And there, our mission was to build products that use fun and play to motivate developers to get hands-on. So we built a number of products, starting with Deep Lens, which was an AI-enabled webcam, Deep Racer, where we took an actual 1/18th scale race car and allowed you to train a reinforcement learning model to teach this car to race around the track, and we built a whole league around it. And Deep Composer, which, to be honest, was a little ahead of its time. We used music to teach developers about transformer models. And of course, transformer models now power all of the biggest large language models and the foundation models that are out today. I also got the opportunity to work on some really neat projects about building scholarships for students and underrepresented in technology. And then, of course, in 2023, when everybody pivoted to generative AI, kind of shifted my focus a little bit and became more of a product advisor. I helped work on early iterations of what later became our generative AI assistant, Amazon Q, and Party Rock, which David mentioned, and Amazon Bedrock Playground. And I'll touch more on Party Rock as we go. So let's start at the top and just make sure everybody has the same context for as we talk about Amazon's culture of innovation and look at Amazon's mission, to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And this mission is quite broad, but the words that are chosen are very deliberate, right? So if we think about like the domain that's chosen, we didn't talk about e-commerce or retail or video streaming or technology infrastructure. We chose customers, right? We didn't say consumers or software developers or content creators. However, there is some specificity in our mission, right? We're laser focused on the customer experience. And that's very deliberate, right? We use our focus on the customers to kind of drive a lot of our decisions. And so, where does this innovation start? Of course, it starts with these customers. And it starts with understanding them and really understanding the context about their problems and what matters to them. Now, what's interesting is that at Amazon, we chose to focus on customers as sort of the center for our business. But businesses have a lot of choices for what they can center on, whether it's new technology, a lot of the startups here, an innovative business model, or competitors and sort of achieving more results than your competitors are. And so, what we do is we use that customer centricity and we work backwards. So a hallmark mechanism of that customer centricity is this process where we think about working backwards from a customer problem. And you might have heard this, there's a single deliverable that gets generated out of our working backwards process called the PRFAQ. It's made up of 3 elements: a press release, which is typically a 1-page press release that is written in customer-centric kind of language, and it allows us to sort of leap forward and imagine what a customer might think about or say about a product. We also have 2 sets of FAQs, frequently asked questions. One set of those is a customer-oriented set of questions, which we imagine what kind of questions would a customer have to ask for us after reading the press release. Things like, how much does this product cost? Or if I'm an AWS customer, how might this relate to other AWS services? And then we have an internal stakeholder-focused FAQ, where we imagine what kind of questions our internal stakeholders would ask us about a product. In other words, how does this relate to, my team's goals or my finances, et cetera. And then, of course, there's a set of visuals that are added on. These could be anything from high fidelity to sort of pencil drawings. And typically, it just helps because sometimes sketches help communicate more than words do. So that working backwards process really focuses on the customer, as I mentioned, and it starts with understanding the customer's needs. And understanding their needs and sort of thinking about the solution helps you generate the ideas that can feed into the working backwards process. But ideas are cheap. You can come up with tons of ideas. So how do you know an idea is actually worthwhile kind of investing in and working on that working backwards process? Because that's a pretty intense process, writing those documents, getting sort of all the stakeholders together, kind of reviewing them. Well, at Amazon, we have a mechanism for that. It's these 5 customer questions that you see on the board here. And we teach Amazonians to kind of wrestle with these questions up front and really use them as an initial filter to determine whether what they're doing is kind of worthwhile and whether the significance of the problem that you're solving is actually going to be worth a customer's interest. Now, these questions can take 5 minutes or 5 months to answer. And really, we encourage all of our employees as they work through these things to think deeply and use them as a guideline for when to actually kick off that working backwards process where they write the PR FAQ. So how does this look in practice? Let me give you kind of one example of this. So if we think about Party Rock, the Amazon Bedrock Playground, which David mentioned earlier, this tool was actually, I'll give you the origin story. So this was actually an internal tool built by a few developers, a few software engineers in Berlin. They built it in early 2023 as a way to get hands-on with generative AI and LLMs, but they built it in a really unique way. At that time, ChatGPT was getting all the traction, and there was a single text box, and you typed in your prompt, and you got a response, and you typed in another one, et cetera. Well, these guys thought about it a little differently. They said, what if we put these things together in a way such that you could build something that was repeatable? So they have this web page and they have these little widgets, almost like the Scratch programming language, where you can kind of plug these things together. And they said, okay, well, the user could have an input. That input could feed into a prompt. The LLM could generate output. And then that thing could feed into another prompt, or it could feed into an image generator, or you could take and add a slider on the UI to adjust the temperature, other configuration parameters for the model. And this thing started to take off internally. It was really just sort of via word of mouth. And one of the reasons it took off was they thought really interestingly about sharing. And they said, look, once you sort of put one of these things together, I'm going to make the URL a permalink so I can just share it with the other people on my team and sort of not have to worry about it, sort of, nothing too crazy. And this is what helped this thing sort of catch on like wildfire. The next thing we knew, Slack chat rooms across Amazon were blowing up because people were trying this thing. And what we found was that more than 50% of the usage was from non-software developers. We had product marketers, we had program managers, we had product managers, we had data center technicians using this tool to build apps. And so what happened? The light bulb went off and we're like, wait, this is crazy. Like, this thing totally makes sense to release externally. Let's think about what our 5 questions would be. So we sat down and we had a little bit of an advantage, obviously. This was basically a working prototype that had tons of usage internally already. So we kind of knew what a lot of the answers to these questions would be, but we also had to wrestle with, okay, if this is external facing, like, what are the most important things that we have to put in place for this product? So we wrote these customer questions, and we sat down and we wrote a PR FAQ. We took the PR FAQ, and it was based on these customer questions. We wanted like a fun, hands-on, product that you could get into generative AI and build some intuition for how you might use generative AI. So we took this product up the chain. We land in the room with Adam Selipsky, our CEO at the time. And you notice I had used this word quirky UX, and that sort of was peppered throughout the press release. Adam reads it, he's like, yeah, I think this is a great idea, really cool. And of course, there's always a little bit of discussion after you read. And he's like, but I don't get this quirky UX thing. Like, what is that? So we explained to him, like, oh, it's fun, it's different. We don't want this thing to look like just another AWS service, right? If any of you have used AWS, you're like configuring a database instance, it's just a bunch of dry tables and like, it's really like not very exciting. And we wanted this thing to be fun and sort of easy to use and like you would want to talk about it with your coworkers. And Adam, kind of looked at this and was like, okay, I get it. And then he was like, he looked at our lawyer, and I apologize to the lawyers in the room. He looked at our lawyer and said, have you used this? And she said, yeah. He says, is it quirky and fun? And she said, absolutely. Like, it doesn't look like the AWS console. It's fun to use. It's easy. I want to talk to my coworkers about it. So just a hint, if you're building a product that has some consumer focus, go ask your lawyer because they're a great barometer for what fun is for an external product. So needless to say, we got the green light. We got the go ahead. And we started to iterate on our product definition. And we're working backwards, we're sort of deciding what features are most important. And of course, as with any kind of product development, there's some contention, right? Everybody has their own opinions about what to do or how to do things. And one of them was really about sharing, because as you heard, sharing we thought was going to be super important. Because if you remember, this is the beginning of generative AI. You don't really know what a prompt can do until you see it, right? I mean, if you tried it, it was like, well, what can you actually type in there? Like, what are the things that you can do with a prompt? We felt like sharing was super important, but not just sharing, but actually like somebody else seeing your share and then being inspired by it and being able to build something new. And so we had this term called remixing, where you could share something and then somebody else could take it, basically clone it in engineering language, and build something new. And so we used one of our innovation techniques to kind of drive this. And we have a mechanism called a tenet. And a tenet is sort of a belief or a statement that can help you drive alignment and use as a tiebreaker when you come into these kind of situations. So we sat down and we wrote a tenet for sharing. This is just one of about 3 or 4 that we actually built. So you can see here what our tenet turned out to be. Sharing apps should be a top-line capability. However, we should ... And I want to make this point that a tenet should have some tension in it, right? It should drive a discussion. It shouldn't be, we have this term, motherhood and apple pie. Like if you bring me a tenet that's motherhood and apple pie, in other words, our product should be fast, or our product interface should be easy to use, like I'm gonna kick that back to you, because there's nothing, like everybody would agree. We're like, yeah, of course, that's not gonna be there's no tiebreaker that's gonna be associated with writing a tenet like that. So we encourage Amazonians, when they think about tenets, to write them in a way such that they'll generate a little discussion, but they should also sort of set out a direction for you that you can align on. And what's neat about tenets is we want them to be useful as a point of view to refer back to later in the development process. So as you're building your product, you could look back and be like, well, that was our tenet. We thought it was really important at the time. Like, we need to be using that to help guide some of our decisions. So that's tenets. And we talked a little bit about the working backwards process and customer centricity. I want to come back to 2 pizza teams, because we've only got a few minutes left here. So what we talked about at the beginning, we use this concept of 2 pizza teams because it helps optimize for eliminating bureaucracy and removing matrix decision making. But the other really interesting thing about 2 pizza teams that we advocate for is what we call single-threaded ownership. And so this means that the team, that 2 pizza team that's building that product, is fully responsible for the end-to-end kind of life cycle and the end-to-end vision for that product. They don't build it and hand it off to another team to run. They remain close to the customer. They build the metrics and kind of the reporting capabilities because they know they're going to be engaged with it and sort of responsible for that long term. And so owning and building what you run is a key part of kind of our mechanism around 2 pizza teams. And it promotes accountability. So let me relate that back to Party Rock then. So with Party Rock, of course, we had this core group of 2 or 3 engineers. They were based in Berlin. But as you know, when we thought about this product, we said, look, this can't look like another AWS product. It's got to be unique. It's going to live outside of the typical AWS website. We know the interaction and the design of it has to be important. So we built the team that way. We grabbed a full-time product marketing person. We grabbed a full-time visual designer, a full-time user experience designer, and then myself combined with the software engineers, and we formed the team that built Party Rock. And of course, after a quick 5 months, we launched a fun, hands-on, easy-to-use generative AI tool to gain intuition about generative AI and prompts. You can see the UX here. I encourage you all to try it out. It's free to use initially. There's no login required. You can log in with just a social account, and it's browser-based. partyrock.aws. My email will be up here in a minute. Shoot me a note if you use it and you like it, if you have comments. We're always looking for ways to improve. Here's a little commercial that we put together, just like a 15-second roll. There we go.
Describe what you'd like your app to do. Fruit tree recipes. Banana, citrus, and strawberries. Wow, that was a lot easier than what Barbara said.
So very much not what you'd imagine, an Amazon or an AWS product to be, but those elements of the culture of innovation really enabled us to achieve that and think outside the box a little bit. So, of course, I would be remiss to not talk about AWS's startup offerings. Over the last 18 years, we've been fortunate enough to work with over 280,000 startups. It's just mind-boggling, and help provide our innovative technology and kind of cloud compute to these startups. And how did we do that? We do that through a program called AWS Activate, which we started about 10 years ago as part of our commitment to help startups. AWS Activate has delivered has delivered $6 billion with a B dollars in AWS credits to startups in the last 10 years. So it includes AWS credits for consumption. It includes special offers from AWS partners, premium training, as well as curated accelerator programs. And you can learn all about it just at aws.amazon.com/startup. And that's all I had to share with you today. Here's my email. Again, if you use Party Rock, just shoot me a note. I would love to get your information about it, and hope you can take some of these learnings into your future. Thank you very much.